recorder is on.
Millions of dollars.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to call the Pennichuck Water Special Committee to order on January 29th at 7 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. And the members of the committee that are present, Alderman Tenza,
Present.
Alderman McCarthy,
Present.
Alderman Dowd,
Present.
Alderman Klee.
Present.
We also have with us Alderman Gidge. Our first order of business tonight is public comment. Oh, would have thought we'd elect a committee clerk first. I'm gonna go out of order and elect a committee clerk unless there's anyone in the public that would like to address the committee. I would open the floor for nominations for committee clerk. Alderman Dowd.
Yes, I would like to nominate Alderman Klee as the clerk of this committee.
Okay, any other nominations? Another motion. Alderman Dowd.
Make a motion to close nominations.
Motion is to close nominations. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. We will now vote on the Alderman Klee becoming our committee clerk. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. You more than happy to join us?
I don't know if it's clapping.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Move to waive the reading of the acceptance speech.
Oh, darn, I was working on it.
So moved. Okay, we have another public comment. That must be a mistake. No, this is a public comment period. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the committee this evening? Seeing none, communications? We have none. Unfinished business? We have none. New business resolutions? We have R-18-006, authorizing Pennichuck Corporation and Pennichuck East Utility, Inc. to enter in a long-term loan and fixed asset line of credit with CoBank and to refinance intercompany loan. We have a motion. Alderman McCarthy.
Move to recommend final passage.
Motion is to recommend final passage. I would like to invite the members of Pennichuck to join us. We have Jay Leonard, the chairman of the board, Jay Lustig from the board of directors, Don Ware, the COO, and last but certainly not least, Larry Goodhue, CEO. Thanks for being here tonight, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I'm going to open the floor to whoever wants to start.
Yes.
Please.
So the motion before you tonight is really, I guess I might say, more of an administrative recycling of an issue that we brought to the predecessors to this committee in a meeting last month. Just prior to that meeting, we had brought this same resolution to bear relative to the external financing with CoBank and the refinancing of some intercompany loans between Pennichuck East Utility and Pennichuck Corporation. On the day prior to the meeting, it was discovered that the wrong dollar amount was included in the intercompany loan refinance, and we brought a restated document with us to the meeting and asked that to be considered in the meeting, which it was. But unfortunately, when the recommendation went back to the Board of Aldermen with the actual resolution, that revised dollar amount was not brought to the floor to be voted upon. And so we're recycling this process to make sure that we include the correct dollar amount on those intercompany loans. Nothing else in the request is any different than what was voted on last month or recommended by this committee and voted upon by the Board of Aldermen. So this is so that we have the authority from the shareholder to proceed on the refinance of these loans, which is still awaiting final approval by the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission as a part of the financing docket with them and a part of our rate case that is in process for Pennichuck East Utility. So that is the nature of what it is we're bringing before you tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak or anyone have any questions about that? You all came out here, nobody wants to speak?
Well, we probably would like to offer some more general comments.
Well, we do have a new committee, so it might be nice to hear from the president
Yes.
of the board.
So sure.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to let you handle that resolution first or however you'd like to.
Sure.
We can handle the resolution first, then we can have discussion after that. Any other discussion on that resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that motion carries. Okay.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Leonard.
So, yeah, we're actually very happy to be here, very happy to see the new committee, and look forward to working with the committee through the next period of time. I think probably everybody knows, but the way we view this, and I should introduce myself too, I'm sure there are people who have no idea who I am. So, I'm Thomas J. Leonard, Chairman of the Board of Directors. I have with me Larry Goodhue, who is our CEO, Don Ware, who is our COO, and Jay Lustig, who's also on the Board of Directors. And we're going to try to come as a group here most of the time when we visit with this committee. As you know, our visits to this committee have been intermittent, really only as needed. We actually had a meeting the other day where we thought we might get a little bit more regular with you, if you don't mind. What we do is send you a quarterly report of sorts, and we thought that it might make sense to come in at least once a quarter and kind of go over that, try to answer whatever questions you may have. So if that works from your standpoint, we're kind of looking forward to that kind of schedule. What we do is basically the city of Nashua bought Pennichuck however many years ago, I guess 2011, right? 2012, 2011 was November of, yeah, in any event, 2012 was when it happened. And you specifically bought it with a couple purposes in mind, to obviously control the water supply, to control the watershed land, and to control the business itself and to run it like a business. And then, of course, to have extra input on the rates and keep the rates as low as possible. We, as a board of directors, as a company, focus on those 3 or 4 things, and that's really what we do, and that's all we do. So everything you see that comes before this committee is toward that end, and most of the things that we come to this committee about are borrowings. We have to borrow between well, we spend between $10 and $12 million a year to support the infrastructure. We don't build infrastructure for some new development. We're just maintaining what we have as part of the company. And so you'll see us on all borrowings. The other thing we do, of course, is we process rates. We have to go to the PUC for review of rates, and we do that fairly regularly. Usually it's going to be every 3 years, I think. We've just had one with Pennichuck Waterworks. We do have a couple companies. We actually have 5 companies and a number of different systems. There are 60 systems, just to, is that right? Am I getting that?
It's close enough.
I think it's
72.
Okay, so there you go. So there are a lot of small systems and then larger systems. You folks probably hear most about the larger systems, but in any event, we do have 5 companies, 4 regulated.
3 regulated.
3 regulated. How am I doing here?
Pretty good.
I've been doing this 6.
Doing okay.
But in any event, we are regulated, so we have to go, every time we want to raise rates, we have to go to the PUC, and that's true for 3 different companies. So in any event, that's the kind of the context that you will see us as we go forward here. We're happy to get into the detail of anything you would like to talk about. Usually quarterly, we come in and talk about our financial statements, because that is what the quarterly report is primary focus. But we're happy to talk about anything that you would like. If there is something you would like, we're also happy to schedule a meeting and come in with particular information that any member of the board or this committee might have.
And in addition to that, every time we do have to go for financing, which is going to be probably at least once a year, there are certain term loan financing that we will be pursuing for our Pennichuck East utility on an annual basis. And we'll have bond issuances. We've got a bond issuance going on now that was actually approved by the Board of Aldermen, and that's actually a facility that allows for up to 3 years' worth of advances on that. So we probably won't be coming back to talk about that for another 3 years. However, with Pennichuck East, we don't have the ability to bond because it's such a small entity. We'll be building things during the year and then reimburse financing with term loans on an annual basis. So we'll want to come in and talk to you about that. Also, there's the annual shareholder meeting, and the Board of Aldermen as a shareholder has the vote to elect or re-elect the directors that are brought forth on a slate in a proxy once a year. So part of our quarterly meetings with you will be to also talk about those materials relative to leading up to that annual meeting as a part of the corporate governance process as a shareholder of the corporation. So as a continuum there. As Jay mentioned, we'd like to meet with this committee on a quarterly basis. And we also want to get more proactive relative to overall education and communication to the Board of Aldermen and the mayoral staff. And so to that end, we're looking at doing something on an annual basis to offer for anyone in those bodies to come and meet with our management team, our board of directors, to tour our facilities, and to really continue an education process as to who we are, how we became what we are, and where we're going, and what the regulations are doing with us. We have a document, we call it, for lack of better terms, the history of Pennichuck, which really kind of talks about how the whole transaction took place in 2012 and what that did relative to rate structure, and then where we're at in rates now. And so that would be something that we would want to share because we feel that the relationship is best with this committee and with the Board of Aldermen and the mayoral staff if we all have a commonality of knowledge that we can share, and we'd be more than willing to do that. So
I agree. Thank you for that. I think the tour and going out on your turf is somewhat important, especially for the new members of the board and the committee. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Anything else? Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if you get an opportunity for the new members to take that tour. I thought that facility you have in Merrimack is outstanding. And I was really impressed at your ability to react almost instantaneously to any water main breaks and fix them expeditiously. You guys are well planned out on that front. Just one question I have, just for my own edification. The infrastructure in the ground here in Nashville, like most of New England, is probably pretty old, and that's why every once in a while we have a water main break. Do you have any idea of just how long it's going to take to sort of recycle all that into a more modern system?
I would defer to our Chief Operating Officer on that, right?
So I do want to tell you that we're very lucky to have these two gentlemen here because they're truly considered leaders in the region in their expertise. Larry tends to be more of the financial expert, although I'm not going to limit his expertise to finance. Don is truly, he knows more about water and pipes and how water gets delivered than anyone in New England. So we're very, very happy to have him, and he can certainly answer that question for you.
Sure. Within the city of Nashua, so if you want to talk about the infrastructure within the city, there's about 368 miles worth of water main. Of that, I think we're at about 126 miles of unlined cast iron water main. So that would be main installed prior to 1937. After 1937, they lined the inside of the pipes with a cement, so that keeps rust and tuberculation from occurring. You know, you put water in contact with cast iron, you get rust. That rust gets pretty stable, but if you get a fire event, if you get a high summer usage period, you'll draw the loose rust off and you get colored water as a result. Could be brown, could be, black, could be, orangish in color. So the goal ultimately is to do one or two things with that older pipe, and that is to either replace it or to clean and line it. Why would you clean and line an old pipe? Well, interestingly enough, some of the most rigid, strongest pipe was the pipe that was cast in the late 1800s. Thicker wall, substantially stronger, and due to its wall thickness will last, there's still pipe in Philadelphia that went in the early 1700s, still in use. And where our first pipe in Nashville went in 1853, and there's still some of that pipe in. And so in particular, the larger diameter pipe that's unlined cast iron. The goal is to line it. The 24-inch going down the main street of town here was installed in 1888. And that line is about that thick. And I'll say this, and it'll happen tomorrow. You know, we have never had a break on that section of line. There have been fittings off of it that have broken, but that line itself, our system averages about 13, in Nashua, about 13 water main breaks a year. That's a very low number. And why is that? Because one, we have a geographically stable area. Two, the soils in this area tend to be sands and gravels, which are not aggressive to the outside of the pipe. So we don't get a lot of failures from corrosion on the outside of the pipe. So we're really fortunate. But the goal is, pipe isn't going to last forever. We've been in the process for the last 5 years of putting in an asset management plan and to replace pipe at the right time. So, what do we look at? We look at areas of service, we look at critical customers like the hospitals and make sure that, if there's if a main's going to fail and if one main could fail and put the hospital out of business, that would be a problem. So really focus in on, replacement plan. Right now, we're doing about anywhere from 2 to 4 miles worth of water main replacement a year. So on that replacement plan, it would be a pipe every 100 years to 200 years. And again, but not all pipes are made the same. We're actually seeing some failures on 1960s and 1970s pipe. Thinner wall, and it just doesn't have the longevity or strength that some of that real heavy, thick pipe had. So it's always a matter of trying to determine a balance there. Some pipe we replaced because, son of a gun, in the early 1900s when they put the sewer and the water in, they put them in the same trench. The guys didn't want to have to dig 2 trenches. Today they have to be 10 feet apart, edge to edge. Back up until the mid-1920s, they would put the sewer in first because it typically had to go deeper and flow by gravity, and the water line would go above. So invariably, we partner with the city. When the city has to replace sewer, they can't do it without our replacing water. So at that time, we separate. And we have a really good partnership with the city's engineering department. Have worked with them closely over the years, both on paving projects and on sewer replacement projects and storm drain projects, where we try to partner together to do the replacements at the same time. So we disrupt the community only one time, that when the paving's done, it's done. It doesn't get done and 5 years later, somebody's digging it up to replace the pavement. And lastly, we share the cost of the pavement. So, instead of one party or the other party paying for the street replacement, we typically try to get the gas company in there as well because they have older infrastructure. We split the cost of the pavement 3 ways, good for everybody. But we have been on a continuous program of water main replacement since I came in 1995. And since 95 to the present, we've replaced a little over 60 miles worth of water main.
And maybe to follow on to what Mr. Ware just said, Mr. Leonard had talked about the fact that we invest about $10 to $12 million in capital per year. If you go back to the time that the deal was actually struck between the city and the purchase of the company as a shareholder, modeling was done that was consistent with that investment. And that investment is into perpetuity. And it only grows over time with inflation because, we know what it's going to cost now isn't what it's going to cost 10 years from now and 15 years from now. But it's a proactive and ongoing replacement of the infrastructure so that we can stay current with that. Our goal is to make sure that we can deliver water to our customers 24/7, 365 with as few disruptions as possible. Don also talked about colored water. We have a flushing program that is conducted every year, except last year, and why not last year? With the severe drought in the state, regulated utilities throughout the state, we're really looking at how do you manage those water resources. So we did that in only critical areas, but we have a very comprehensive plan that'll begin again this spring where we flush, and that whole purpose is to knock any of that collected residue on the inside of the pipes and to flush that so that we're taking it to waste versus pumping it through someone's home. So.
Did that answer your question, Alderman Dowd? Beautiful. Alderman McCarthy.
What shape is our fire infrastructure in?
So again, if you look at the ISO rating, which is 100 points, the water system is 40 of those 100 points, and it's broken into 5 points are associated with the hydrants themselves. And they look at the hydrants and they look at, if the hydrant is struck by a truck, does it have a breakaway coupling at the ground? So instead of it ripping it out from the main, it falls over. So every hydrant in this city has a breakaway coupling on it. What's called a highway flange. Secondarily, the ISO wants to see that your fire hydrants are tested twice a year, or they're operated in what's called a wet check and a dry check. Those are done every year. So that gives 5 out of the 40 points. We always make those 5 points. Then the remaining 35 points, they go into areas of the city and they say, okay, what type of infrastructure do we have here? This is multi-story wood structure. We'll go down into the lower part of the city where there's warehouse storage. You need 3,500 gallons a minute of water, and you need that for 180 minutes. So they'll look at the storage and they'll look at the flow rates. We don't hit, 100% of those requirements, but when we redesign pipe, we make sure that the pipe is big enough. A lot of the pipe that went in French Hill was all 4-inch and 6-inch water main. As you're all aware, a lot of French Hill has been rebuilt. Now there's a series of 12 and 8 and 10-inch water mains up there, so that area, the flows meet the ISO requirements. Ultimately, our goal is at some point that every hydrant in this system, based on the surrounding structures that are there, will meet the fire flow requirement. And ISO comes in every 10 years. So that's part of our consideration when we replace a main. Is it the right size? Does it need to be larger?
How often do the hydrants themselves need to be replaced? I mean, what's the lifespan of those?
Typically around 60 to 70 years. Again, there are very few moving parts.
And they're maintained, right?
They're maintained, so that's part of the process. Is they're operated, at minimally twice a year to make sure everything's going to operate properly.
And repainted and, kept cosmetically sound.
How old are our oldest ones?
Oh, boy, I couldn't give you a number off the top of my head, Brian. Like I said, everything's got a breakaway coupling. Breakaway couplings didn't come in until the early 1960s. So I think there's somewhere in the order of around 2,500 hydrants in the city. So they're all less than, say, 70 years old, if you look
Do
at.
they all have like thrust blocks?
Yes. Down at the bottom, where the water has to change direction.
I mean, it seems like if you were missing that, and I can imagine that 60 years ago we weren't that good at it, that's a real recipe for failure when the hydrant's being used.
Well, any water purveyor's nightmare is they come to the hydrant and the hydrant doesn't function properly.
Further discussion, Alderman Clee.
Hi. Sorry for my question. You said something about the infrastructure was 100 ISO points.
Right.
What is our score?
So the score for the water department last time around out of 40 was around, I think it was 34.5 or so. The remainder of the 60 points are a function of the fire department and the city dispatch. So it's a very specific process, and I think the city fire department and dispatch process is highly rated. And then your community rating is a function of the total number of points, and then that affects the insurance rates that people pay for their homes. Brian, you're probably looking it up on.
I'm gonna see if I can Google it.
They come in every 10 years and do that rating.
So basically, we know our part of that rating. We don't know the other part of it
Yeah.
specifically.
I think
fair.
the
That's
the
fair,
last
yeah.
time they came in was 2009, I believe. So we're due.
One more year?
Yeah, I think so.
Right around the corner.
Yes.
Anything, Alderman McCarthy? No?
I'm good.
You're good. Any other questions, discussion? Seeing none, thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here this evening. Really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
we look forward to, a tour and
Yeah,
more
that-
interaction with with Pennichuck.
That'll be all three facilities too. We're figuring out the logistics and the exact date.
When it's
I
warm,
want to do
right?
a little bit of coordination on that.
When it's warm?
Well, we were looking at the end of February, but maybe it'll go into March, depending on how things go. And we're wondering if, maybe we get a local bus company or something like that, so we can, transfer you folks between facilities. We'll figure out the logistics on that.
Okay, very
But we
good.
want to give you a tour of our headquarters facility, which we're working on what the future of that is, the brand-new operations facility, and the water treatment plant. And so you can get a good, full flavor of what we do, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, new business ordinances, we have none. Public comment. I don't know why I didn't invite him up. Remarks by Alderman. Possible non-public, no need. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Alderman McCarthy makes a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:27. Thank you.